and call this meeting to order. Are you ready for recording?
Ready to roll?
Perfect. All right, if I could have Steve call the roll.
McCall.
Here.
I'm
Here.
Martinezson.
Here.
Clipfell.
Here.
Hildendager.
Here.
Horning.
Here.
Fairlessack.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Munson.
Here.
We have quorum, Madam Chair.
That's it. All right, while it appears that we have a short agenda, I believe that there's going to be some hearty discussions, so I don't think that we can assume with 4 agenda items that it will be overly short, but I wouldn't complain either. Commissioner Munson would, oh shoot, you know what, we need to do appraisal of minutes, and I believe, yes, Marie.
I believe that in the previous minutes, that item 6 should, at the end of it, you should actually write what the motion was. Which is, so it should be changed to Marie or M. Horning. Move to follow the Burleigh County Committee appointment schedule. It was seconded by A. Helm, and then motion approved. So I would move the minutes be approved with that change.
And my brain's fried today, you guys, so forgive me.
It's about,
We don't have to have
oh, maybe you don't
an
not care.
approve, no, yes,
Oh.
but we don't have to have a motion and approval for hers.
The clarification was, if I might, that citizen or county citizen appointments would follow county appointment schedule as established for county boards and commissions.
Right, well, the way I read it, I just felt like it might have referred to all of the conversation.
Although, well, I tried to put the bullet points in.
Yeah.
But the stakeholder representatives are defined as being their annual in April.
Right, which is not what we agreed to. We agreed to follow the counties, which the county does it in December. We apply for our.
Madam Chair, I thought the discussion was that April was the anniversary date of this committee.
That's what Kay wanted. That is not what my motion was.
Yeah, I remember it as such as well.
That's all. Easy.
Go ahead again.
Okay, so I just wanted it to be changed to M. Horning, move to follow the Burleigh County Committee appointment schedule.
Yeah, and that will be December.
That was my recollection of
Yep.
how that.
All of the auxiliary boards
Every year.
every year.
Well, I think they're staggered.
They're staggered,
You
yeah.
guys staggered them when you approved them at your commission.
Yeah,
meeting.
they're all
Nobody-
staggered.
Yeah, there's a 3, 2, and a
Yeah.
1.
That's just the citizen one.
That is the, yeah, that's the public
And the
stakeholders or the.
The stakeholders are on their own terms of what they do.
And as far as I remember, the recall the conversation, that stakeholder appointees basically at the discretion of their organization as to if and when they were to be replaced.
Mhm.
That the rotation in line with Burleigh County's rules applies only to the 3 public stakeholders.
Correct. That's how I recall.
That's how I recall it.
Yep.
I think I could just go to a motion with the.
Because I did move to approval with that.
Yeah, so we've got a motion on the table to approve the previous meeting minutes as amended. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Seeing as done, approval of the minutes goes on the record with the slated clarification and change. Now, Commissioner Mudd, may we hear from you?
Right, so Burleigh County Commission did approve the budget for the county last night. One of those items obviously is ours. There's been a lot of changes, so our 2024 approved budget was only 78,100. Our approved budget for 2025 is 189,400. The biggest difference that we have to be careful of or have to consider is in the past, Burleigh County Highway Department took care of the snow, took care of the asphalt, took care of the grading. It's changed again. Now they're willing to do it at a fee. So initially they told us they weren't gonna do it. We needed to have private contractors.
Mhm.
I went out and got bids for all of the services that we would need. I shouldn't say, Dave did. They've got all the bids. We put that in. That's now in our bid. That's been approved. Now they have come back and said, well, we would be willing to do that, but it's not gonna be absorbed in the county highway department. It'll be ours. They'll bill us as needed. So the benefit is the bid that we received for doing a lot of the asphalt work on our road here, the county and I met month and a half or so ago. Their initial bid was half of our private contractor's bid. And now if we wait and time it with some other work that the county's doing in this neighborhood, instead of being, initially we were at 85, the county thought we'd be close to 40. Now, as of last week, it's closer to 30, as long as we tie it in with other work in the area. So we'll wait and see if that all really happens that way. But at least we are covered for having it done by a private contractor if we need to in our budget. If things change between now and then, who knows? But our budget includes utilities of 9,400, contracted services, which typically is the park district for doing all of the work that we ask them to do out here, of 61,925. Supplies, I moved that budget up to 15,000 because in 23 we darn near doubled our budgeted amount and spent darn near a little over 14,000. The county fairgrounds has a $2,000 line item, and then we go to road and asphalt grading, snow removal, for a total of 189,400. So we now have a operating budget that will allow us to continue to maintain. Now, as we start looking at 26, and we need to start thinking about that now, as we plan, you know, with Swenson and Hagen as we're coming through here, what else needs to be in our budget as we continue to grow. And so that's one of the challenges or the charges that we will have as a group over the next 12 months or even 8 months, is to start thinking about growth plans and what we need to budget in there for that. Second item on the list is the reserve account. As of September 6th, that account had $5,696,279. Having looked into that fairly well, a lot of that is in a long-term investment. And they are working on getting me the details of how many years are left of that. The initial blush from the county finance director, we've got 15 years left on that investment. So it's nothing we can cash out and use tomorrow, but we could levy against. You know, it's there, it's making interest. But so it is something that is usable, just not liquid cash. I think there's about $200,000 that's in liquid cash. I think it is. The rest is in long term.
At the June meeting, there were several questions regarding the reserve fund. That Auditor Sponskowski was requested to pull together and bring back to the committee, and fully recognizing that you've certainly given us some of that here, but I feel that there was a little bit more that was requested. And I know between budgeting and then his absence today, are you aware if he's still working on that, or would a friendly reminder be warranted to have those items reported on?
Let me work on that.
Okay. Can we make sure to have that on the agenda for the next meeting to hopefully review that information?
Mhm.
And yeah, if need be, you can always send an email as to the items that I remember were requested as well, so we're all on the same page.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I understand that, and I know.
Fight the ones you know you can win.
Yes,
You know,
right.
that one is not a winnable conversation right now. So,
Well, just noting, from my position on the table, the importance of having that, all of the information available, especially as we move forward towards future use plans and.
we're best bypassing the auditor and going to the finance director.
Okay.
Moving forward, and that's kind of where I've gotten the information that I do have. Is from the finance director, and so.
What information were you looking for?
A couple of questions that I remember off the top of my head was. What the fund started at and when. I know one associated question with that was the per acre. What was sold per acre of the land west of Yagan Road. Then an inquiry as to. The return on the investment. And whether or not, at that point, the auditor, when I watched the video back, at that point, the auditor wasn't sure of what was allocated to the general fund and not, and how that was configured. And there was a third point,
The interest.
yes.
Well,
the-
he explained the interest
Yeah,
last month, that because it's a long-term investment, it is going straight back into the fund.
I remember more so about the interest though, is why the interest rate, the rate of return was so low.
Right,
Because we,
It was only
because-
65,000 interest.
right, because, well, the problem is because they tied the money up. How many years ago when they sold that land?
Right, which is,
It's probably going to not matter at this point.
right,
You ain't gonna get it out.
no,
no,
So
but I mean, just
anyway,
for historical, you know,
Yeah.
the only way to move forward is to understand where.
Yeah.
I mean, you have 200,000.
So I got
that's
a
it.
question, was that put in that long-term investment right away?
I don't have that answer. I know that's something that Lee was working on to try to figure out when it was put in. To the information that we found. And this has been a couple weeks ago. That's been in that investment for 10 years. At least. So it wasn't put in initially.
So then in the last 10 years, nothing's been pulled out of it.
And and the type of investment that it is in. We're stuck at earning our 1 and whatever %. And the amount that it's gonna require to pull it and reinvest. Should have been done when interest was even higher, but it wasn't. That does require an action of the county board in order to do that. And so that's why we're working with Lee now instead of Mark to try to get some of that information figured out.
And stand on top of it so that we can act quickly
Yep,
as a committee
Yep.
to make that
to make the
recommendation.
recommendation to the board to do that, yeah.
Steve,
Madam Chair, the other question that's come up is what's been expended out of that fund over the last 10 years? And if it's been invested at that point where you can't touch it, I question how money has come out of that account over the last 10 years. So,
Cause at least 3 years, money has been taken out of that, or at least 3, to subsidize the general fund.
I don't know that they actually take the money out. I think it's a paper thing. If I remember back in 2019, it's more like they have that money in the bank and it's not a bond or anything weird like that, but you're able to budget saying we're gonna buy down a mill, which is worth $700,000 or whatever, because we have this $1 million, but you never take the money because you run a thing,
Oh, that
run.
Transfer out of one fund
Yeah.
to the other fund.
You're
in a
covering
piece
it
of
really,
paper.
yeah, on a piece of paper.
The
is how
money's
it
still
gets done.
there, it's
Yeah.
just, right,
The
Yeah, it's
principal of the
weird.
Principal of the fund went down
yes,
at the
Right.
end of the year.
and yeah, and last
So
year,
they did move, they
There
did it
was a
on
third of-
paper, I don't know that they did it
No,
no,
in the fund
the money's
itself.
in X, Y, and bank of,
Yeah.
8 million, whatever it is.
Yes,
But on paper,
Paper,
they
it's lower.
transferred it
Yeah.
out.
on paper, it's transferred out, but they're in the bank, I do believe, is the full amount, if that
Right.
makes sense.
It just doesn't
Well-
belong to the Riverlight complex
Complex
anymore
anymore.
based
But
on.
that's
Which
the
one?
point, does it bond or does it stay in there? Does it go back to the complex? Or is it gone?
which goes to the point of the clarification as to the question was specifically asked.
Right.
does that money go to the general fund? And the answer was a wishy-washy, yeah, well, kind of, but not really.
But that's where Marie is right.
It's paper, it's not,
It's on paper, it has
Yes.
been transferred from the Missouri Valley Complex to the general fund. How the cash got moved to fulfill the budget, that's beyond me. But our balance continually got reduced.
yes.
So am I correct in my understanding? That regardless it was with unicorns or not, our balance, our available balance in that fund I earmarked for the Missouri Valley Complex has decreased in principle.
Correct.
And with your investments, your long-term investments, you can do that.
Again, on paper. The money hasn't left the bank. That $8 million is still there.
So are we getting interest on 8 million or 5?
Well, we're not getting interest at all. Because what has happened, and this came out on the state audit again this year. All interest of all funds that are invested at Burleigh County gets deposited in the general fund account.
Right.
None of it goes back into each individual account. And the state audit has listed that several years in a row that that's improper. The auditor's office has decided not to adjust. The finance director and the chair are pushing to get that remedy. Because and whether it's the courthouse fund, the Provident Building Fund, the Missouri Valley Complex Fund, I mean.
We're not
There's-
unique is what you're saying.
No, none of
It
them,
may not be the best way to address the financial statements and positions of each of the different.
right, but
areas
across the
we're not special.
board, we're not special. Across the board, it has been understood now, since we've hired the finance director, that these processes are incorrect and they need to be remedied. And it is a focus of our board and the finance director to get that.
Cause that definitely serves as a concerning point for me specifically, as I look across the room and we look at future use, as I believe. Already the wishes of the committee has been expressed to not burden the taxpayer from a general fund to move forward on improvements
Correct.
there. So our option
Right there.
is that
Yeah,
fund.
yeah.
And we need to have an accurate picture of how, why, where.
Yep.
And a path
I
forward.
mean, I look at the last X amount of years. I want that money transferred back in. I'd love to have what was taken out for budget purposes,
Plus interest.
but at minimum, I think that interest needs to be corrected so that we're gaining our interest every year.
Mhm.
Not Burleigh County in general gaining that. I mean, it should go to each one of the accounts.
Agreed.
So that's been the direction of the finance director for the last several months in trying to remedy that. Now that we're over budget last night, hopefully now we can spend some more time directing our efforts in other places.
And it goes without saying, I don't know if there's anything I can offer, but as the representative for the committee, I would offer
Yeah.
anything that I can do to assist with that process,
Doesn't hurt to keep mentioning it to commissioners so that it's top of mind.
which is why I will appear in the minutes.
Hmm.
Oh, does that wrap up the first bullet point for you?
First one, yes.
And on to the next.
All right, so, and I never did get your name, Josh. So Josh contacted me, or actually contacted Parks and Rec, about utilizing the track that's out here. And so I wanted Josh to come here, explain to you guys his thoughts, what his goals are. Get him involved here, so that we can move forward. I don't know when the construction's gonna start for the sewer line that goes through, because unfortunately that will go through the track. So we'll, whatever the thoughts and plans are, we'll have to keep that in mind, as far as when we can actually utilize it. But, from there, Josh, I'll let you give us your thoughts. What do you want to use the track for?
Well, a lot of the racing community, they're a little tired of Mandan. And that's the truth. They're throwing a lot of the kids in with the adults. And poorly managing that. People are gonna start getting hurt. A lot of them have approached, we want to try to rebuild this track. Or if not relocate it somewhere on the property. And try to get some racing back. Either whether it's just youth or both youth and adult racing. I have talked to a lot of people in the community. I think the only thing we are going to be able to do is the dirt track. There are people that want other tracks here, but I think that's out of that scope. But as for the dirt track, we can raise our own money to rebuild that or relocate it. We just need permission to be able to do what we want to do.
Sure.
Be able to make them safe. Because I think the reason it closed originally is somebody said the grandstands were unsafe. And then it just ended up getting torn down and left. The guys that were running the Bismarck track went over to Mandan. A lot of the Mandan racers aren't happy over there anymore. We're looking at all our options. Putting the youth up is what we really want to do. Because adults can get pretty aggressive and the kids are still learning.
Right.
That's what we were trying to do. Now we can raise our own money to rebuild the facility in every inch we need. It's just more or less, can we use the ground?
Right?
I have a question. Is there a different person in the room already representing Stock Car?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you with Josh or are you a different?
No, but it's, I'm glad to hear
Numbers. Because you guys approached the commission a couple of years ago,
it. Yeah, last year.
last year to do
Yeah.
what? What is different?
Not exactly what he's talking about. I'm
You're
sure.
just a different group of drivers.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all similar.
Okay.
It's just that I never knew anything about what you're doing, so afterwards we'll compare notes.
Yep. Perfect. Perfect.
The sewer line you're talking about, where's that gonna go through? Is that going right through the racetrack or to the north of it?
It'll be through the north side of the track. It'll actually take out some of it initially. They'll have to go through some of the motocross track as well. And then come across or to a new lift station on the west side.
There's a lot of electrical stuff buried over there. A lot of it, because I was involved with that at the beginning.
You know,
And I'd like to see you guys come back over and use that somehow. I'm all for it. If I can help in any way, let me know.
I was under the understanding that that construction project was gonna start shortly. I haven't heard anything officially. The county did give the easement for them to come through, as long as it was rebuilt.
Where's it gonna go?
Going to that new housing development.
Yeah, so it'll start on the southeast and then up on the west.
Yeah.
I have a question
We've got
about their dirt track. You
Yeah,
guys
that's
have
what
like
it's-
a memorandum of understanding
like
with
on
the
a problem,
county
so
for
they're
what you're
not-
doing, or have you even done anything?
No, we haven't done much.
You haven't used it?
Yeah, the only thing that we've done so far, we got some noise ordinance issues out of the way, like it was. We're able to do that type of thing. You did the check in there. That's as far as we got, to be honest with you. So we've been racing all season.
We had that in place years ago out here, but now I suppose since Bismarck's grown, we gotta redo it.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, right.
Well, and you can always get special permits issued for the night of the race if it's a noise ordinance thing.
Sure, yeah. And ours, mine, I should say, wasn't so much to hold races, like Mandan does. I mean, I don't have as much interest in doing that. We want to use it more as a practice track to get, because the idea is that there's the youth are huge, and that's all we're concerned about, right? Not all we're concerned about, but that's the main concern. And what happens is basketball, football, hockey, you got arenas to practice in. With racing, you don't have that. Plus you got a short window in North Dakota. Having said that, some of the best dirt racers, in the United States and the world for that matter, come right out of North Dakota. We're going into nationals. My son is ranked #1 in the world. Preston Martin out of Bismarck is ranked #1 in the nation and world. Noah Madler out of Dickinson is ranked in his class the same thing. So what that says, there's a lot of action here in the state, but we have nowhere to practice. There isn't one practice facility in the state of North Dakota, really anywhere in the country. You know, so anyway, that was
That's
my
how you-
focus, not to hold races, it's to get practice for the youth and anyone who wants to practice for that matter, but predominantly the youth, that's where it's at.
And when he presented in front of Burleigh County Commission, we gave him approval to rebuild the track as he felt and hold those practices.
Are you looking for holding races, events? Is that
We
what
wanna
you're,
try to get youth racing.
youth racing? Okay.
Our goal is to get them away from the adult racers
Mhm.
and give them time to learn and
And the
their car and how to
Okay,
control their
racer
car.
Yeah.
Cause they're getting bashed around pretty hard. A lot of people have actually left. They go to Jamestown, they go to Minot, they go to Dickinson, they go wherever they can, but they're not here anymore.
What's the youngest, person racing out there in Mandan, youngest age?
I think he's either 8 or 9,
Wow.
and he runs like it's almost like a mini modified.
And they were in slingshots.
He's not in slingshot. Or no, yeah, that one was a slingshot.
Yeah.
No. And then, I know they tried to get the racing go-karts, but the racing go-kart, it kind of just died off. But there's also, mini sprints. There are youth in the legends, but like I said, they're now getting into the adult at 13 and 14 years old. And the adults aren't exactly being nice.
Are you guys both talking mainly about the Legends cars?
No, I think there's other stuff there. My son raced a legend. He's 13, well, now he's 14.
Because when you're talking like the practice and that is, but is it mainly, it's not just when you think of stock cars, not the big.
Not full-size car.
Full size, yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that you can do that, but right now it's just, like the mini mods or slingshots. Legends is a little different. It's a smaller car, but they're faster than all the other ones. So they're more, takes more technique and dangerous. You know, it's not that you can't just throw a kid in a legend car.
Mhm.
You know, you can throw them in any of the other ones to practice, but in legends you can't. So I think you're referring to more of the smaller classes, not the legends.
Yeah.
Because if they're coming into a legend, you're getting thrown into the adults, that's your own problem.
Yeah.
You know, you're ready for it, but it's the other ones, I think, that. But because they don't have anywhere to go, youth, it's like with motocross, you know, they can go out there and they can all, you know, with stock car racing or anything. Again, we have more dirt racing in the state of North Dakota than there anywhere in the United States. And we got nowhere to practice.
Is that something that you could do all of that on that track that you're
Oh, yeah.
on?
Yeah, they used to race there.
Yeah.
I mean, used to hold races there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big track.
So we
It's actually, it's a better
wouldn't,
track than Mandan.
Find the
In
place
a
to
lot of ways.
build it.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not even.
I don't know about that.
That's these two.
Only racing.
Yeah.
Conversation, is this track usable? Is it?
yeah.
Is it what we
a
need?
litany of, you know, questions that are at the risk of going down a rabbit hole that certainly don't need to be answered here. I will say, my father-in-law got his racing chops out on that track out there, so it is very near and dear to the Loco family's heart. Like a couple of questions, and I don't know that we need to answer them, but things I'm wondering, do you have a established organization of sanctioning? I mean, is there, 'cause I'm basically looking for, is there a framework, insurance, you know, how all those kinds of things work? And you don't need to answer it yet. I look kind of across at the table too, is this kind of request that becomes before the committee something that is made easier if and when we get to the key public
Mhm.
part of that? And then also specifically what the ask would be and then the timeline, because clearly we're at the end of the season now, we're looking at a sewer remod and then, some sort of coordination effort. So there's just a whole lot of ping pong balls in my head right now, but
Yeah, we're gonna get together probably right after this.
so it's kind of just the informational, hey, this is what we're thinking of. You're not expecting to leave here today with an answer.
Something we can roll on through the winter
Right.
months and get ready for next.
I was just gonna say, this gives us the winter with Jason
Right.
involved,
Yeah,
to make sure that we're ready for spring.
Absolutely.
well, and I like this as a case study as to
Right.
how can we address these needs going forward. Yes.
So, excuse me. During the planning process, we're gonna be asking for a zoning change. So to bring this conversation up, if this is gonna be something that's explored, knowing that practice and possibly racing could be facilitated here. You're talking about festivals, you're talking about car shows, you're talking about all these things, right? So if there are some noise ordinance type things, this is the time to honestly talk about all those things, because that is the place to go bring that at that level of conversation, not after we plat it. Should be as we go into this to throw it all out on the board to say, how do we come to this goal? So that's good conversation to have, quantity of races, number of people you expect, like all of those things, because these are all the things that are gonna get grilled back to us when we sit down with, 30 people talking about a plat and talking about the zoning. So anything that you guys have to give in all of those regards, regardless of what group you represent, we need to know all of that, because then this is something like you don't have to go fight that and then you fight that and you fight that. It's something that we can get it accommodated as part of the documents. There might be a PUD ordinance that goes with this, and then maybe that's all looped in and all the various things come together and get all disseminated down.
Hopefully avoiding things like special use permits.
Well, you would, potentially have to go back to a city and or county commission to say, hey, we're asking for this. Well, why wasn't this talked about when you guys talked about your vision, right?
Hey, Kevin, I have a question for you, is that this would be under management of the park district as an operating group out here, then, right? And in the present position of the park district,
Mhm.
would it be appropriate to start putting a operating plan or a business plan together? Just the framework of it, how it starts coming together, because that's also gonna help Jason with this from an operating standpoint.
Yeah, I think developing the thoughts and ideas, like you said.
Yeah, if
Race
two
practice.
questions come up, what's the age of youth, how's that? Is it a class of cars that's limited? Well, legends, is it everything but, or is it, you define that even one step further, this is the type of activity that would be held out here, age-wise and type of car. Unique and different than the other track. And both practice and events. Those are some questions that I put forward.
And even if these are daily events or weekend events, like you have potentially RV camping, does that mean you're gonna have family bring their camper here and they're gonna be racing Friday night to Sunday? And like all of that stuff goes in to how this whole thing gets kind of worked out with everybody.
If I can add, in my conversations with the city on the multiple conversations we've had and the management part that's stuff for the property in the past 8 years. There's been a lot of things that have come up on the property. If we can, I would recommend that we try and stay away from a PUD. Because it has done nothing but create a problem out here. When we talked with Arlo's about parking the buses out here because they have a problem with their grounds. I got my hands slapped because that's not in the PUD. But I mean, the property's not getting used for anything, so why can't we use it for that? So they backed off on it, but in the conversations we had and, the the legends weren't any louder than like we talk about, louder than like a street bike. So based off of that conversation, the city had no concerns with the fact, the proximity of the residences, which are probably gonna hear it more that way versus that.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, that's all the conversations we had at that point. So if the cars that you're talking about are smaller than the legends, imagine it's probably a little bit quieter. Certainly no pipes on.
Most of the lawnmower engine.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, some of those things we have kind of had conversations with already. I think some of that, if we just say it's keep public and everything falls within the ordinances.
I think that's been the direction of this group anyway, is getting it from a PUD into the public, back to P. So that we have less of those concerns.
That'd be great. From management.
Yeah.
Yeah, question, would that track stay the same size, 3/8, or would you make it smaller?
3/8 would actually, I think, be pretty close to where it would be.
Okay.
I think our goal is just to rebuild what is already there.
How much
Wash
damage
it,
was that?
put it away a little bit.
How much damage was done in 2011?
I don't know. Those Autocross guys are using turn 3 as a jump right now, so they're eating away at that bank pretty hard.
Yeah.
We have a lot of sand out of there.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's a lot of heavy trucks going down that embankment and up that embankment.
Sandbags. Yeah.
That was,
So what is the age of youth definition?
What is I've seen them as young as 8,
Yeah.
but I know,
8 to what?
yeah, because I think before that they're in the race.
They don't get to 15 and below.
So bringing up go-karts,
Well, that's
would
for
that track work for go-karts?
Yeah.
So you could even
but
add
then
go-karts
the
into
rest
that
of
thought
the
process.
will be under, so 15.
Right, but that's why I say this is for the go-karts, not the legends.
Yeah.
Legends are from. They're 12 to 112 or so.
I think White Soda is 14 now.
Yeah.
White Soda is 14, that's the rule.
Well, some overarching observations I've made here, and please anybody step in on this, if I'm misreading the room, but I'm sensing a general sense of support towards whatever you are proposing. I'm even more encouraged to know that there is overlap there, and I'm excited that we can use this as a case study. And I think it completely highlights the importance in what this committee was formed to do and what we can bring to the stakeholders. With that, I don't believe that there's any order of business that you need from other than, as chair of the committee, I'd like to express our support and encourage those conversations to continue.
Would we need to add another stakeholder to the committee, or
I'm sure.
Would
Would
you
you
assume
say-
it would still be
Got it.
circle track in general?
Yep, okay, they did have one then.
Just have one.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, not ruling out any possibilities as far as this goes forward, because
Right.
again, I live mostly in a horse or a dog or a dart competition world, and different clubs can use the same facility, but each of those clubs wouldn't have a seat at
Right.
the stakeholder
Right.
table, is how
Right.
I kind of understand that to be. So,
But when Josh called, it was an exciting thought process
Yeah.
because it fit exactly with what we want to do. The growth of this facility.
Yeah.
And so this adds one more piece.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
You just gotta move that fair, they always go over to the Civic Center over here.
That's as soon as those chutes and those crowd get up on the hill, that's exactly what that's for. We gotta get it moved. Then we're working on that.
I don't know what they'll use the Civic Center for now. I remember when they used to have concerts in there, and they used to have a basketball team.
You just gotta make it bigger. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Add on.
Hell on to it.
That's a committee I don't want to be on.
No.
Discussion points on the future considerations of the stock car stuff. If not, I would like to provide ample opportunity to the representatives of Svensson and Hagan to where are we at? What do you have to bring to us?
Madam Chair, I apologize, I
Oh,
have to run.
okay.
But I'm glad we're at that point for Jason to take it from here, and you guys are all the ones that need to be involved with Jason, so we'll circle back and have another conversation later, but thank you very much.
Commissioner.
I got one question before you go.
Yeah.
I was looking at this map here of the grounds. What is this community gardens doing on Buckstop Junction side? Who put that in there?
I didn't make.
It's just-
That's not gonna happen.
That's why we're all here to have a
Yeah,
conversation.
That's right. I'm gonna catch it before you go.
And with that.
He bails on us.
Gentlemen,
All right, well, thank you for having us. So anytime I sit down with a landowner or a developer, the first thing I want to do is I want to find out what's their dream, right? You got 40 acres, 100 acres, or an acre. What do you want? And how, what's your vision when it's done? So that I can help navigate to that end, right? So you've got a facility out here that's used by various groups of people and underutilized for decades. And you have a various amid of things that everybody would like to do from their standpoint. But think of this like a college, right? Where we've got doctoring and engineering and all these other things. So we've got this facility that serves and a function for everybody. So that's what we need to figure out is how do all of the various groups' needs fit to the overall campus? And then what does that campus need to be constructed as in order to help facilitate your individual uses? We need things like road networks, we need utilities. I see RV campgrounds, I see parking, I see restroom facilities, I see public use, places for car shows and festival grounds and community gardens and dog parks. And each one of those things kind of somewhat contradicts each other, right? But you can start putting some things together that feel good. So when I look at the master plan, I look at who needs what facility here. So if I've got these public facilities, right, everybody needs some parking, so everybody potentially may or may not use an RV campground. Is that where that should be? So when I look at this map and I look at all the RV camping kind of in the center of the facility of all the uses, but everybody that comes here needs to park somewhere, right? And I need a road network to serve everybody. So some people, this equestrian center is going to have large vehicles coming to it, deliveries for festivals and things. So, a 20-foot road isn't going to make that work, right? You're going to have and bring people here racing. You're going to have points where you're going to have nobody out here, and you're going to have other points where you're going to have a ton of traffic. So we need wider road networks. We need turn lanes. We need water and sewer. Right? We need to handle storm sewer. And so how do we make all that work? As a point of reference, I took some measurements up in Minot at the fairgrounds, the parking lot where the drag strip is on the east side. That parking lot's 1,100 feet by 1,900 feet. Okay, now granted, we may not see the amount of people, but as a point of reference, if I took this RV campground area right here, that's 500 by 300. That will house approximately 250 parking stalls. That's 13 times less than the parking in that one parking lot. So when we
by
ask,
parking stalls, do you mean for an RV size parking
I
stall?
mean a parking lot.
Cars.
Yep. So you got to pick up in a car, 250 stalls. So that it starts with concepts of scale. What kind of scale are we talking about? I've got festival grounds here that you're saying, potentially 20 acres, right? So when I start looking at these things conceptually, I start saying, well, this is 45 acres, this surely is not 20 over here. So what does that become and what are we housing and what kind of numbers can I put in there, right? So 250 parking stalls may work for some things. It may not work for other uses as well. So does that mean that things like this RV campground wants to swing up here and I need to move this over and put a parking lot in this area so it's more central to go here and here and here and up here? And does the community gardens, which was already kind of alluded to, does that make sense that that's here? Should that be somewhere off to the side where you can come in an evening and you're not being drugged through the whole facility, right? The dog park, does that make sense to have that up here? Who's the dog park serving? Is the dog park serving the RV campground that come and spend the weekend here? Or is it somebody that's gonna drive from where? Out east? Or is it just something that's on paper? So what can we have, right? I hear bringing all these cars in. I hear not very many cars here, but I hear a lot of trucks and trailers and things like that, which means I need a larger parking facility for that. So if I'm bringing in, say, 30 cars, you know, do I have possibly some 50 vehicles in here with trailers? So do I need to have 84 RV camping spots? If you look at the equestrian center, which is a different group, but if you look at what they have, they come in here and they say 50 trailer camping parking spots, 56, 56, and future 56. So you potentially fill one thing up here, you could have what, 150 campers in here? So definition of your uses will help define how you need to start putting this puzzle together. So what I want to do today is to be able to have each group talk about what they see. What is it that you see today? What kind of people do you see today? What kind of traffic do you see? Is it weekend, during the week? Is it special events? And where do you see yourself at future? And that future is some undefined place, knowing that you're going to build a facility here to support the uses. You can't come in and say, well, I got the space that works today and I'm going to have double the occupants because we're going to make all these improvements to our group facility and it's going to double, but I'm going to run out of room. So we want to make sure everybody's accommodated. The other thing that I saw that was interesting on this master plan is these little red dashed lines around here that seem to indicate maybe areas of influence or use. So does the individual groups lease space?
Some.
And is there lease agreements with a defined area?
I know we have, when they developed Buckstop Junction back in 92, they signed a 100-year lease for the amount of acreage we currently have.
Okay, so that's interesting because you can take and put that boundary on here and say, even if you're not using that area, it's off use, off limits to other uses, right? So we have to start divvying that up. Is the goal of the group that the individual uses will have partially their own parking and also need to have shared parking facility wise for their individual uses from time to time as well?
Before we open up with that can. I also want to be mindful of time, because I don't think that we can achieve all of your goals in the next 11 minutes. So my first question is, does Swenson and Hagen have a pre-designed, even baseline survey of sorts that we could even use as a starting document to provide to each of the stakeholders to gather that basic material, or the basic, you know, how many acres do you think you need? How many parking spots? How many days of use a year? So that we can at least have some sort of uniformity and then do a deeper dive. My second follow-up question is, what kind of timeline are we on? Like, did we need this in July? or May of last year?
This timeline is your timeline.
Okay.
Right? So, for instance, I always talk to developers in seasons of construction, right? We have 6 months of construction time, and in my world, where housing is in that, that means by the time November comes, I better have some pavement on there, because people want to sell lots and do things. So, in that type of conversation, if you have facility things that you want constructed next year, then we would want to be able to start in the spring with those construction items and move forward. Now, right now, what's been authorized is this conceptual design in this plating. So after that, then there's kind of a reboot, I would guess, to go back and say, would you authorize now getting to that point, the actual design elements and stuff like that. So from a plating perspective, you have no facilities that you're talking about now updating. So your timetable is just, you know, how quickly you would like to move with that process.
One follow-up question on Marie. As part of your conceptual design and plating, does your firm do the research into leases, memorandums of understanding? Are we going to have a package deal where we kind of know where everything is? I know we've had a similar document, but
It's this document.
yeah.
Right.
I
But
do not know if it's accurate.
So
that would be my question.
So back
yeah.
in 2010, we were hired to do some planning based on what the county commission instructed us to do, which was to plat the property with lots and blocks and right of way. And the reason behind that at that particular moment in time was they had a desire to sell some lots, right? So they needed to actually break the lots up in order to sell them. Well, that kind of led into this whole process of everything else beyond that. And then, of course, it was put on hold, and here we are today. So, we would ask, in order to do a full-blown look at everything, you know, for the plating, we will need title work.
Yeah.
So we'll have to get with Burleigh County to get title work and work with them on getting that. We had title work when we originally platted it, but it is outdated. So we would do that, get that title work, and then we would also do searches for any of the things that would be recordable that we can find, right? So if there's documents that are word of mouth or things like that, that aren't,
Commission minutes.
yeah, things that we can't go back and say, this has got something here, then we don't know about that part of it. But, yeah, in order to plat the property, we would need that title work, and we'd have the easements and all the things that would be on there, any restrictions.
Hang on 1 second, Wayne, did you have?
Okay,
or
well
did-
now, I might have lost it, but
Yes.
I'm I like extension, right? Same on 4-H Tyler, so there's no offense to you. Will there be a time when we'll talk about the people around this table? Do they actually belong here? So I'm gonna say, for instance, extension. Is there gonna be a conversation? I mean, where is that appropriate, that they should move to the Provident Life Building or something? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
doesn't even make sense where they are here now. I would also question the equestrian center. Is that land available for us to dream about a giant extension service building, an education building that has classrooms and a kitchen where we can teach people to can? So that's a question I also have is, like, this map, I mean, and we're in this room and we're stakeholders, but I mean, are some stakeholders, I question whether they really are stakeholders. Are they really part of these grounds?
That's a little more complicated to unwind, right?
Okay.
Because you have some obligations for the property. The lease agreements are obligations, right? Those are definitely stakeholders, in my opinion. The groups that don't have that, but you have a committee, and if you have this committee and you've named people that are part of this committee, then I would say they have some rights because you put them into that, right? So I think the committee needs to know what, from that standpoint as committee, what that is. So if there's a set of bylaws that you have for committee, does it define that? So what
And that would be,
technical document defines?
well, it would be, it's defined by the decree of the county commission, who in that specifically identifies the stakeholders. So
Yeah, they did identify.
at the risk of stepping
Yeah.
way over my boundary here, I would answer and assume that, if the question is presented by the findings of the engineers of, that it would be up to this committee to take that concern to the county commission, who would ultimately be the ruler of who's appointed to the committee.
And then what's your relationship with the county? You know, at the end of the day, if the county says, we want them here as being a committee member, does that mean that that's a vote of 7, 8, how many ever? Or is that a decree of county commission hereby states that they will be here?
Well, it's not so much as someone able to be on the committee or not, but like, my question is,
But
can
I mean,
we
in use.
dream, like, if I'm representing 4-H, that's who I represent.
Yep.
So can I dream a big dream of a giant 4-H learning center on his racetrack, for instance? Or are you trying to define kind of using this map? Maybe that's a better question.
We are not defining who should and shouldn't be here.
Or where we are. How about this? Then my question maybe is more in relation to where we are on the property. Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah.
Are you saying, you know what I mean? Like, will there come a time when we visit with you, if it's me and you talking about what does 4-H dream? I'm gonna say, I want a giant 4-H building in the middle of this racetrack.
And
Or
that's a great dream.
is that something we would?
Then it would be, okay, is that something really that is able to be pulled off, right? So I can put a track down near a floodplain in a
Right.
floodway, but I can't
Right,
necessarily
you
put a
can't
building
put a
there,
building
right?
there,
So
right.
there's some physical
Yes.
things that are gonna stop certain things. The other thing is, this committee kind of determines as a group the feel and what your complex is going to look like. So that's why everybody has to come to the table and say, here's what I feel like our goals are. And then the group has to talk about it, because my guess is there isn't anybody here that can say about any other group what their goal, like, I know what your goal is. I know what you want to get to. Does anyone actually really know what all the other groups want? And that's the thing, you've got a master plan, but I don't feel like that master plan addresses that. Somebody put a bunch of stuff in there and said, hey, I heard dog park, I heard RV, I heard parking, like, we're gonna just slap them in where we can fit them, right?
Mhm.
But is that how it should be? Or should you be saying, well, I don't have a big use and I've got 20 acres here and I don't need it all, but we're running out of parking locations. So, you know, do we need to kind of rework some things and we could help? Or like, hey, I've got half an acre and I really would like to get where I got 5 acres, right? So that's what we need to define is, I don't know what your goals are.
So are you gonna be meeting, maybe, are you gonna be meeting with like buck stop junctions separately, or are you thinking this is something we do at our monthly meeting?
I think you guys, I think you should have a special meeting to where you block out 2 hours. I think everybody sits down so they can hear what everybody has to say. And then we take all that information and we try to go and start placing this information down on the paper. Because topography and all these other bigger picture things come in about what that complex looks like and how it should operate and feel, right? Flow and stuff. And then we bring that back and we say, okay, here's what we heard. And then everybody has some time to look through this. And then if people are like, well, I don't think you quite heard me, then we need to sit down and start talking to the individual people and say, okay, give me a more defined view of what you're trying to tell us.
Like the dog park thing,
Yeah.
like,
If
and
we
can we ask that, you know what I mean? When does that come up? We can remove
Right.
that. from-
Dog parks are the worst thing
I'm, okay, I'm going to have to stop that conversation right now because I don't want to go down there.
Oh,
We do have a question over there and then I want to ask, one overarching question. And then again, we're running up against our time.
So just quickly, so that 2 hour, whatever meeting.
That block of time.
Yep. You would be, or someone from your group would be there, I'm assuming?
Yes.
To help, yeah, okay.
Yes, yes.
In other words, it would be unproductive, right?
so
I
can
got
I
you.
make a motion that we set time aside a special meeting outside of our monthly meeting, either at night, since the majority of you guys work, and it's not real fair for you to ask your employee or employers to, hey, I gotta be at this meeting, that we sit down some night. If we don't want to do it here, the hotels are, I mean, the hotel's available and that can seat 160 people.
Yes, I certainly don't need to ask my permission to make a motion. You go, girl, but. I want to walk it back real quick. As I understand, you do have a template of some sort, even of a basic one, to help all of us get started to think through that process.
So in 2010, when we were doing this planning exercise, we did a topo to facilitate the plat. So we can get that out to everybody. We'll take the lot lines off of it and we can show you where all the easements are that we had back at that time. Okay. And it'll have topography and all that. So we can at least show you kind of what's on the property and the relationship of things. And then, you know, based on what I've been provided is you kind of have a starting point for a master plan. So
Who provided that?
Steve got that.
Where'd you provide, where did it come
We
from?
were working different concepts and particularly to put in the equestrian center and get all that.
Oh, to get your,
There's existing roadways on there,
yeah,
you know, it's locations of things, it's possible uses that have been discussed.
it was just kind of
No, and
made
I
up.
guess the thing, my concern here is that we're trying to get the plat changed to public. And we do have a time. And I think in your proposal, it was by January.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's more important to get the plat redone. And we can talk concepts and stuff, and what you're bringing up, Marie, is one of those conversations that as we start planning facilities, how do we engage everybody? You know, how do you share facilities? The locations of, you know, the RV parks and the campgrounds and how they're scheduled and planned, that's a planning and programming question.
But
It
if
helps
we're
that done. So it's getting them in the right locations, yes. We're also got a big hindrance out here with the utility easement takes up a lot of space. And so how do you use that? So how do you share facilities? How do you resources? But it's a question of the programming when it's all done. And these are the operating programs that are here right now. So, but the platting, the public is the most important element before we can go anywhere on this thing.
Yeah, I'm not, sorry to interrupt, but I'm concerned. The devil is always in the details, and I'm concerned that the progress towards the public will get bogged down
Don't
with
derail
discussions
that.
about
Don't
dog
derail
parks,
that
just
right
as an
now.
example. So am I correct in hearing that what is beneficial to your team is to get our dream?
Yep.
And provide us with an awareness of this is how things look right now. Without saying that anything you've seen before is the gospel truth going forward. But you need to know from us right now, if Marie wants that extension office in the middle of the thing, we got outdoor or an indoor archery range, all that, put it down on paper. That we can at least then start working towards the public with an idea of how much space and where these things could go in. And after that process, and we know we get the public, we can start talking some detail.
We're gonna have to present a plat. Now, like I said, in 2010, we dedicated lots and right of way. So there was a defined area for streets and for utilities. This particular plat is going to not have dedication of right of way, is how I've been told. So if that's the case, then if we are dedicating utilities and access, then it comes down to should we and do we need to be dedicating utility and access easements? Because City of Bismarck's gonna come in here and say, I'm gonna provide you fire support, but I need access
only in
easements to
here.
drive on your road network. right?
Yeah, it's a negotiation.
And if that has all of these different groups, we'll want a dedication of easements, so all the various groups can use that. So that is why I need to have some of this conversation now. I don't need to know that we're gonna do this 3 times a day, but it is helpful to know that, like, hey, we could have 200 people at this event. And we only got a parking lot that we're programmed for a space for 50. Where are you putting everybody, right? So we can get through that to get to this plat started. We just need to get knowledge of what it is that you guys are trying to get to.
Would it be fair to ask of the stakeholders of the committee that a 2-week deadline to put together here's my ideal, what each of the stakeholders are looking for? And then maybe do a motion that following the week after that, we bring all of those pieces together for that discussion?
I don't think I can do it in 2 weeks. We don't have a board meeting until like October 13th. 20th. Thank you.
So is that what you're saying, Steve, is slowing this public thing down? Is it, I'm still confused as to how far can we get so we don't do that?
Yeah,
That's
what
what I'm
Jason's saying, I agree with, that there are certain elements of this planning process we need to do. And it's the roads and it's the access points and it's all the public utilities, all those kinds of things. And Dave's been at it a lot longer than.
Because
Bob.
realistically
So at
speaking,
minimum,
this can
but
take 3
we-
months to get the rezone, is it not? Because do you
Well,
have to have 2
It'll
public
take us
hearings?
4 to 5 months to get through that.
Yeah,
to get it,
so
so
we
it's
need to have that
able to be
finalized
part of. But we can start the planning process now.
now.
So why don't we do it this way? In 3 weeks, have just an initial one. And then you can have your board meeting and find out exactly what your board wants, and then have another one. I mean, there's nothing that says we have to have everything designed in one meeting,
Correct.
you know?
Can I?
Give them a foothold so they know where.
And I think it's because the commission directed you to do this. Why is there such a rush to change it to public? I mean,
So what happened when I gave my proposal to Commissioner Munson? He wanted me to put a theoretical development schedule together. And I said, tell me when you wanted to have the road network system and the utility system put together, right? And so he said, okay, if we go out to here, and I wanted it complete here, how does that backtrack? And so then I just put in the 4 phases: concept, platting, the design and construction, and then worked all of that backwards to get to a date to say, if you wanted to stay on this type of a schedule, here's how you would have to follow along. Right. And then, so that's kind of what said it. Nobody said to me, it has to be done on this date, but it was based on what we gave in that proposal, some insight to say, like, here's the concept of space that it's going to take you to get to that end, so that people kind of had an understanding of how long this process would take you.
Is your budget or estimate that we've agreed to at all tied to that timeline? In other words, if this goes longer than January 1 or whatever it is, does that change our investment?
There's some soft things and some hard things. So for instance, once the platting's done, I don't have any other contract. So that's one thing. The county would have to approve design in order to get started on design. So does that mean when you get into December or January, if you wanted to continue down this path, the county would have to vote to go into design to keep going. So the reason I said January would be, we would have like February, March, and April, kind of get through some design elements and get it ready for bid, and then that would start you in a kind of a spring construction timeline.
but what are you constructing? That's my question.
Well,
With $200,000, he didn't put in his budget to build a road. So
so
you aren't really gonna build a road until
Right.
2026, to be
Sure.
honest.
Yep.
So that's why I'm questioning this huge rush to get to public, and I get, like, Commissioner Munson is who I'm referring to as him. He's going to be again in June at the table
Mhm.
asking for roads, and
For
so
more
he
budget.
does need to know, I get that
Yep.
part, but I don't feel comfortable speaking for 35 people in 2 weeks.
And that's
And
fine. I
so-
think that was taken off the, you know, that's definitely not holding to that. We don't have a motion on the table as to when we would like to meet. I'm, as much as you are adverse to rushing this, I am just as adverse to kicking the can unnecessarily down the table. I think that there's a happy medium to be, that gives us all ample opportunity to go back to our respective boards.
How often does your group meet, for instance, that you represent?
Oh, depends on what we have going. It might
you
be
don't know.
once a month, might be twice a month, might, you know, just
Okay.
depends on where
What,
we're at in the process.
what about motocross? Like how often do you guys meet? Same?
Yeah, once a month at most.
You see, okay.
So there's two elements here, right? There's plating and zoning. And then we talk about them kind of like they're together, but they're really two separate lines. They just kind of run parallel to each other. So, we can put together the application and put in for the zoning request change. That can track wholly independently of the plat. I mean, you can rezone a piece of property and not replat it, and we are platted today. So there's nothing that hurts that element. And that's something that we can start and get us pre-plat meeting with the city, and then get us kind of in front of them and start engaging in that conversation. And then that plat mechanism can, you know, start when the committee is comfortable saying, go please, like, we feel like we're.
That's when the project starts.
With that,
Once the zoning is done, then you can start plotting for the specific projects.
well, we could. So the plat, subdivision plat, right, and then individual design for all the individual uses.
Right.
Yep.
So we can move ahead with getting zoning
Mhm.
changed.
Yeah.
Without all this other stuff
Correct.
going on.
Correct.
Because
That's my point.
if I understand this correctly, with the PUD, you have setbacks and certain things that restrict you from
Yeah.
doing projects compared to a public,
Yeah, so PUD is.
right? Or not?
Cause
It's
each
a-
lot essentially has its own setback.
Right,
Well, a PUD is a plan unit development. Plan unit development just says that there's an underlining zoning there that you follow, but you make changes or put restrictions on additional items inside or outside of that zoning. So right now, we are going to try to get rid of that PUD and go to a P public, which
Right.
would then extinguish all of those other hindrances and things like that. What'll come up through staff discussion is all of the discussions about uses and all those things, because staff is gonna want to be comfortable going to make a recommendation in front of the commission to say, we recommend that this PUD to people.
But there are still setbacks and things like that that don't apply.
right, but it's not as restricted.
Right. Well, what's restrictive for you today is you have a plat with lot lines. And so you have individual setbacks that are on each one of those lots. And if we extinguish that, and all of a sudden it's the whole property, now those setbacks are about the property, not about the individual.
Right.
Lot line.
Yep.
So we're at, and I have a hard stop coming up. We're at the 17th of September, I believe. There is only 3 weeks between this and our next meeting. If I'm not hearing any proposals or motions to do anything more hurried. Could we identify time at the October meeting to have those initial conversations? Provided that not everyone may have been able to go back to their respective boards yet.
So not to interject, because I know you guys have all done a ton of work to this point, but initially the conversation, when all this started, there was a lot of conversation Steve had worked on to talk to the individual groups to get some of your wish list items. Have you guys seen that?
No.
So that might be a starting point, is to,
Um,
because a lot of his
excellent
questions
point.
that he's gonna be asking each one of these groups have already been answered. He's starting from ground zero. He doesn't know anything about each one of your groups because he hasn't been shared that information. So if that information is given to Jason, that would get him
At least started.
way up there. And then what you guys can do as your groups, take those lists back to your groups and vet them with your groups and say, is it still valid? Are these still the things that we want? And then this can shorten that timeline.
Mhm.
Cause that will give them that starting point and stepping off point. At least that's my thought.
Yeah,
Any-
it's
any
certainly
information.
something I was not aware of, so.
Didn't realize you weren't given any of the things we've been doing.
Hmm.
Okay.
Now, you know why it was so important for the, to start.
Yeah,
Okay, so can we just ensure that that information transfer happens and then we can plan on, unless I hear otherwise, plan on our next meeting, carving out time to hear report back, hopefully from Auditor Splonskowski on the financial stuff. And I'm unaware of anything else coming down the pipe that this could be the primary focus of the next meeting.
But I think Jason can move ahead
Yes.
with the zoning.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. Move
Absolutely.
ahead with that, about all this
Yep.
other information.
Right.
Yeah, because as I'm hearing it, and I could be misunderstanding wrong or too much summarizing or condensing this, is there's our wish, needs, and our wants and our dreams in one camp.
That's number 2.
Right, but we need to make sure that the land is zoned and platted correctly in order to even start considering the wants and wishes and needs and
Zoning's
dreams.
first. So
Yes.
plus there's a whole gamut of things that you can do and can't do on public property. I mean, there's
Valid.
gotta be compatible use or
Yeah.
compatible programming to the zoning. But it leaves you a lot more flexibility than what is out there now.
Jason, do you have enough for us, from us to go forward?
Mhm.
Pending receiving whatever information from the groups that you have not received yet?
We will start the zoning application request,
Okay.
and I will get with Steve. And
And
then
then
we'll get some information stopped and we'll have some conversations.
Okay, does it
The-
please the committee
the
with
other- the
that?
other information
plan?
doesn't slow down the zoning process.
Well, I don't see any need to change anything or schedule any other meetings once I hear otherwise. Thank you. Great input today. Is there anything else to be considered before adjourning the meeting?
I got a question. On this deal, you're talking about titles, title on the property. The county has a title for the whole area out here.
Right.
Does that mean each group has to have a title?
No, we have a lease.
Yeah, it's-
So the county owns the property,
Yeah,
and so as part of the plating process, we'll need the title commitments. And so title company will provide title work that will have any of the file type easements,
Okay.
restrictions. And
like
things
the lease and everything.
Yep, so
Okay.
we would actually go through that with the plating.
leased, this land is leased.
Mhm.
County owns the whole piece.
Yeah.
All right,
I was like, did you buy our?
consideration of adjournment. Is there any opposition? No, we will stand to adjourn until I believe it's October 8th.